Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to our Café Scientifique. We're really excited to be speaking to all of you about Parachutes for Young Drivers by Young Drivers project and the framework that we've created, as well as the importance of youth engagement in road safety. The Café Scientifique is generously supported by the Canadian Institute of Health Research. So my name is Umiyanga Yogalingam. I'll be one of the facilitators of today's Café Scientifique. I am a road safety consultant at Parachute. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Parachute, we are Canada's national charity dedicated to injury prevention. If you'd like to learn more about Parachute, you can always visit us at parachute.ca. Joining me in co-facilitating this webinar are two members of our Canadian Youth Road Safety Council, Aiden and Kiana. And I'll turn it over to Aiden and then Kiana to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Yumi. Hi, everyone. I'm Aiden D'Souza. I've been a part of the Youth Council since it first started. I'm currently a student, part-time student at Seneca Polytechnic, and also an employee working with many different youths. And I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. And I'm Kiana Gigliotti. Like Aiden, I've also been part of the Road Council since it started as well. I'm a fourth year student at the University of Calgary, and I'm studying exercise and health physiology there. In my free time, I do strength and conditioning coaching for hockey athletes, and then I also volunteer with children with disabilities as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Aiden and Kiana. We also have a third member of our council, Parsa, who will be behind the scenes taking care of the tech and admin pieces today. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. We'll be starting off providing some context on youth road safety in Canada, followed by an overview of the For Young Drivers framework, as well as our recommendations outlined in the framework that our council members will go through. And then the majority of today's webinar will be our amazing expert panel made up of Anne-Marie Hayes from Teens Learn to Drive, as well as Sylvia Lark from Springboard Services. And then, of course, our two amazing youth council members, Aiden and Kiana. We will then end off with a Q&A from the audience. Please feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the chat, and we'll try to get to them during the panel or at the Q&A in the end. And if you have any links or resources that are relevant to this topic that you wish to share, again, please feel free to use the chat and drop them in there. So before we get to the For Young Drivers by Young Drivers framework, I want to provide some context on youth road safety in Canada. So road crashes are the third leading cause of death for youth in Canada. That number fluctuates across the year, but is usually the top three causes of death. Young people who we define as 15 to 24 years old are killed in crashes at higher rates than any other age group under 75 years old. And this demographic has the highest rate of involvement in fatal collisions per 100,000 licensed drivers. So I'm sure many of you are aware youth can be a tricky population to target for awareness, education, programming, advocacy, and there are a number of reasons for that. One is they are more likely to be influenced by their peers than other age groups who might encourage unsafe driving, such as speeding or impaired driving. Their cognitive, physical, and social skills are still developing until the age of 25. And so while still developing, it can lead to poor judgment, organization, poor decision-making, as well as more impulsive action, which all play a role in unsafe driving. And then young people or young drivers are more likely than older drivers to drive while distracted. And this can be due to things like inexperience, maturity level, or overestimating their ability to multitask. And then we also have the fact that just young people have limited driving experience, meaning that they may not understand road safety rules. They may not be able to safely handle dangerous driving situations and have less ability to control their vehicle. So these factors and more kind of contribute to why it can be difficult to engage young people in road safety messaging and programming. What the literature tells us is that youth engagement does lead to more effective programming and healthier youth. So young people are more likely to adopt health promotion and injury prevention strategies when they are involved in developing programming and messaging than when adults are the only ones developing them. So taking all of this together, Parachute recognized the need for new innovative strategies to reach and engage youth. As well as address the issue of road injuries and fatalities. And that's where our For Young Drivers by Young Drivers project comes in. So our approach to developing our For Young Drivers framework was centered around youth partnership. We collected data through a variety of ways, including through a literature review, environmental scan, focus groups with our youth council, which I'll speak about next. We also conducted a national youth road safety survey. Our youth council also did peer-to-peer interviews, and we also did expert interviews with almost 12 experts across Canada. So taking everything together, we engaged almost 300 young people aged 15 to 24 years old to inform the framework. And the tools are now available in English and French on the Parachute website. So all of our activities in this project were done in partnership with the Canadian Youth Road Safety Council, our amazing youth advisory committee made up of 20 youth aged 15 to 24 years old across 7 provinces. So we met with them monthly, and every month we do some brainstorming around different road safety and youth engagement topics. So things like what are youth social media preferences, providing feedback on road safety advertisements, and then also helping to develop youth-led road safety solutions using health promotion materials. So the council also co-created our data collection tools, such as the National Youth Road Safety Survey, as well as a peer and expert interview guides. And then, of course, they also co-developed the framework and the accompanying tools for the framework. So honestly, this work would not have been possible at all without the Youth Council, and we're really grateful to them. So we're going to go through the framework very briefly. There is an in-depth framework report, as well as tools to apply the framework, as well as how to develop your own youth advisory council. And we'll drop the link in the chat to the framework page, so you can take a look at that. In terms of the framework, there are multi-fold purposes to the framework. One is to help road safety stakeholders understand what youth engagement is, especially what meaningful youth engagement is. Also to help improve understanding of technology and communications-based solutions for reaching young drivers, as well as passengers, and then helping to implement effective strategies and practices that would support youth engagement in road safety programs and initiatives. So you'll again find more details about the framework in the report and tools. So this up here on the screen is just our visual of the framework. It's made up of 3 guiding principles that you can see in the middle in gray, as well as the 5 areas of focus surrounding it in green. So the areas of focus are not necessarily distinct categories. So a lot of them do overlap with each other and kind of feed into one another. But they are shown as different categories to ensure that we are, holistically engaging youth, and then also to provide organizations with, options in terms of what areas of focus aligns best with them. So that's a brief overview of the framework. I'm going to pass it on to Aiden and then Kiana, who will go through the recommendations outlined in the framework under each guiding principle as well as areas of focus.
Thank you, Yumi. So the middle part of the framework is made up of the guiding principles, which are principles that should be applied to and drive your work engaging in road safety programs. First, we have the meaningful youth engagement, with the key word being meaningful. This means going to where youth are, treating youth as expert decision makers, and providing a variety of engagement options for different youths. The second guiding principle is equality, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. This means not just having the needs of diverse youth populations in the back of our minds, but when planning, implementing, and executing road safety programs, we're actively thinking of it. This provides more access and opportunities for diverse youths and actually addressing road safety needs. And the last guiding principle is the harm reduction. Young people may use alcohol and drugs, so it is important to create programming that reduces the immediate risk of being on the road after using alcohol and drugs, without necessarily aiming to reduce alcohol use and drug use itself. Youth are not representative in the model or victim blaming when it comes to this. You're going to lose them if you take this approach. So now I'm going to move on to the areas of focus for the recommendations for each. The first being youth partnerships. So what is the difference between youth engagement and youth partnerships? Youth engagement is a spectrum and youth partnerships is a deeper end of the spectrum. It requires investment of resources, it is long-term, sustainable youth and integrated into the program planning and implementation of evaluating decision-making. So here are our first recommendations to building effective youth partnerships. The first one is integrating youth partnerships into your organization's strategic plan so that resources can be dedicated to youth engagement and not an afterthought. Next is establishing a youth advisory committee to co-create and co-lead road safety initiatives. Parachute has a step-by-step guide on how to do this. Next is working with a network of youth ambassadors who can spread road safety messaging and advocate for change in their communities. Finally, engaging in youth in evaluating road safety messaging and programs. This is a good way to ensure that youth build some important skills and your evaluation plan is capturing all relevant data. The next area of focus is youth communication, and it looks at the effective strategies when communicating directly with youth about road safety. This includes the traditional digital and social media. Our recommendations include co-designing and test driving road safety messaging and programming with representative youth. The Youth Council did this with Parachute National Teen Driver Safety Week. For the first time in 2022, we were able to point out things that we thought that would resonate with youth and what wouldn't. Staying up to date on youth social and digital media is very important, and it helps us in our development in this tool. The next recommendation is using social media marketing strategies that resonate with youth. Avoid doing anything that young people consider cringe, but rather focus on creating messaging that allows us to reflect. We also like humor, trends, things that are done well and relatable to different youths. And the last recommendation is to use storytelling. Young people are receptive to real life stories, things that really can make a difference. Stories can cause youth to be empathetic and potentially change attitudes towards risky driving behavior. I'm now going to turn it over to Kiana to speak about the rest of the areas of focus.
Awesome. Thanks, Aiden. So our third area of focus is youth outreach. So that looks at who influences youth and then how we can also reach youth using these groups. So based on our data, peers, parents, schools, educators, and experts all influence road safety behavior in youth. So our first recommendation is to prioritize peer-to-peer communication as young people are most influenced by and receptive to their peers around them. Some peers can also be more influential than others, and these can be older youth, youth leaders, the popular kids, and near peers. And near peers are those young people that are not necessarily in the same life stage, but they're very close in age and also have expertise. So this could be like medical students or nursing students. So our next recommendation is to train parents to provide accurate road safety information, since they are one of the biggest influences on our driving behavior, but their information that they have may be out of date. I know my parents tried to teach me how to use roundabouts when they came to our community, and that didn't go so well. So our next recommendation is to use schools and educators as a delivery mechanism to reach a large and captive audience of youth. And then next, we also recommend collaborating with experts and credible organizations, since young people place great value on information from reputable and expert sources. Our last recommendation is to rethink using social media influencers to deliver messaging, as young people have developed a very healthy sense of skepticism towards social media influencers, especially when it comes to content that may not be in their niche as well. All right, so we'll move on to our next area of focus, and that is youth capacity building. So this area of focus looks at road safety knowledge and skill gaps among youth and how we can address these gaps by using education and training. So our first recommendation is doing a needs assessment to understand what youth need to become better drivers. And this includes bridging gaps in knowledge and skills. Our next recommendation is to increase and reinforce road safety knowledge and skills through many different ways to engage diverse youth. So this can be through our traditional media, social media, videos, arts, and music, among many other things. Our next recommendation is providing in-person and visual opportunities to practice, virtual opportunities to practice skills that promote safe driving. And this can look like robust driver's education, telemetric apps, virtual reality, and hands-on driving skill programs as well. Our last recommendation is incentivizing youth to care about road safety in order to help them drive safely. This can look like receiving extra credit, safer classes, or gift cards for completing road safety education programs. And then also educating young people on the financial costs of a crash and maybe having lowered insurance premiums for youth as well. So we'll move on to our next area of focus, and that is youth advocacy. So this is looking at how youth can be engaged in making decisions regarding their built environment, systems around them, services, and policies in order to create large-scale systemic changes. So our first recommendation is to understand what areas of road safety are very important to young people. We are really in tune to the changes that are needed in their communities to make roads safer for both us and our peers. Connecting road safety to other social issues such as climate change, substance use, and mental health can also be a very great way to help young people actively engage in road safety. Our next recommendation is developing youth advocacy toolkits, resources, and training opportunities to engage decision makers. And this is something that can be intimidating, and we're also just not sure how to do it yet in some cases. And our last recommendation is advocating to have youth informal decision-making spaces, such as internal meetings with stakeholders or large funders as well. This can be very empowering for youth and can also go a very long way to create the next generation of road safety advocates. So that's an overview of our For Young Drivers framework, and I'll turn it back over to Umi.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ada and Kiana, for that great overview of the For Young Drivers framework. So looking into the future, we're hoping to prioritize youth engagement with youth that we're not necessarily reaching with our current road safety programming and messaging. And these include youth who live in rural or remote communities, Indigenous youth, newcomer youth, and more. And one avenue we're trying to address this is through a youth road safety design jam, and that's actually happening right after this Café Scientifique. So what this is, it's just a facilitated discussion with over 20 Indigenous youth, newcomer youth, as well as youth living in rural and remote areas to better understand, what barriers they face when it comes to accessing road safety education, information, and just generally being safe on the roads. And the insights from the design jam and hopefully more facilitated group discussions in the future will help inform our road safety programming. And we're hoping to summarize what we've heard and potentially add an appendix to our For Young Drivers framework to better address the populations that we are not reaching. So we're going to move on to our expert panel. We're really pleased to have a great panel of speakers today. So first we have Anne-Marie Hayes, who is a licensed classroom and in-car driving instructor and the author of 3 Keys to Keep Your Teen Alive. She has a BA in communications from York University and is the president of Teens Learn to Drive, Inc., or TL2D, which is a nonprofit that provides resources for families with teens who are learning to drive. She has served as an executive member of the board of directors for the National Organizations of Youth Safety, or NOYS, in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. And she is a member of 6 international road safety organizations, including the Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals, as well as the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety. Next, we have Sylvia Lark, who is the lead strategist for an online learning platform focused on substance use education called the Community Learning Hub. Since 2018, Sylvia has been working on curriculum development for various hub educational modules catered to at-risk youth and adults. The foundation of the curriculum content is to use harm reduction, a trauma-informed perspective, and a high level of learner engagement. And hopefully we'll hear more about that during our panel. Next, we have our 2 Canadian Youth Road Safety Council members, Aidan D'Souza, who is a student at Seneca Polytechnic in Toronto. He has graduated from 3 public safety programs and has studied traffic enforcement investigations and road safety techniques. Aidan has worked with hundreds of youth through his role as an ambassador and mentor at Seneca. He has consulted with UNICEF Canada, the City of Toronto Youth Council, and the United Nations to share his experiences interacting with Canadian youth. And last but not least is Kiana Gigliotti, who is a 4th year student studying exercise and health physiology at the University of Calgary. In her free time, Kiana volunteers with children with disabilities in physiotherapy and hospice environments. And she also works as a strength and conditioning coach for hockey athletes. She has a true passion for health promotion and looks forward to what the future has in store for her. So thank you all so much for being here. So I'm just going to stop sharing so everybody can see our panelists. Perfect. So to start, I guess I will pass it off to Anne-Marie to tell us a little bit about Teens Learn to Drive and the work that you do in terms of engaging youth in road safety programming.
Thank you. And I'd like to share my screen. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh yeah, there it is. This sharing the sound. Okay. So thank you, first of all. And Aiden and Kiana, I agree completely with everything you said. You can see me in my little TL2D car there. A lot of what I do is working with a group of young people, university students. It's highly creative and a lot of fun to work with. The company is Teens Learn to Drive. We're a nonprofit based in Mississauga, shortened to TL2D. And we also have one program called the Vision Youth Network, Vision Zero Youth Network. I'll talk a little bit about that. First, I want to show you a video, and we'll try this. Not exactly fast. Here we go.
Wayfair presents Accent Furniture. Ooh la la.
Oh,
Save on
we
cabinets
can't see
in every
your,
style or every style.
You can't see my screen?
Find a new bench.
we can
with
just see your PowerPoint.
low prices. And
Okay.
get all the side tables and savings.
See.
Plus assembly that's basically already
Okay.
assembled. And
Can't see this at all.
No, your eyes don't
That's
deceive
annoying.
you. That really
Okay.
is a dog behind the wheel of a car. It's the culmination of several months of intensive training for 3 special pooches in New Zealand.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to stop this share now.
It all began with the basics, like getting used to the gear stick.
Okay, I'll go back. Just what it is a video of dogs who learn to drive. And it was done in New Zealand, and it was done as an experiment. And they did teach the dogs to drive. The dogs could change gears. They could can you see my screen now?
No, you're not sharing right now.
Oh, okay. Let me go back to this. Share it again. Oh, this is very annoying. Sorry.
That's okay, Anne-Marie. Do you want to drop the link to the YouTube video in the chat?
Yeah, I'll do that. I can show it at the end.
Okay.
All right. Oh my God, I can't get back to the share. It's not coming up here. All right.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay, you can see it. Now you can see my email. That's great. Oh goodness. I can't believe this.
That's okay. Do you want to just talk about the PowerPoint without sharing it? That's okay.
Yeah, I could do, but that's kind of goofy. I don't know why this isn't working.
We can see it.
There it is. You can see it
Okay.
now. Good. Okay. All right. So the video is really just about dogs learning to drive. And the fact that dogs can learn to drive, that's not what gets people into trouble. They can learn to, the dogs are driving in a field, there are no other vehicles. It's recommended that young people, when they learn to drive, have between 75 and 100 hours of practice in the first year, which is really, really important. So those skills are really important, but that's typically not what gets young people in trouble. Seatbelts and airbags, being far enough away from the airbag and wearing your seatbelt properly. That's really important. How to share the road with other vehicles. Vehicles could be huge trucks, they could be cyclists, they could be pedestrians. That's important. How to deal with emergencies. When something goes wrong, what do you do? Maintaining a roadworthy vehicle. Passengers. Umi talked about, or one of our young people talked about, the number of people who are injured, seriously injured or killed in cars. And more than 50% are passengers. So even though you don't have control of the car, there are a lot of things that you can do to help yourself. Texting and distracted driving, speeding is a huge issue, and of course, impaired driving. So those are all things that that we talk about. For many years, we did an event called the Sweet Life Roadshow that toured all around all around Ontario. We went from Windsor up to Red Lake in the north. We visited over 200 schools, but of course, COVID changed all of that. So today we concentrate a lot on social media. We're on TikTok, on Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube. We have a lot of resources on YouTube. One of the resources on YouTube is a podcast. We've done a number of podcasts. Some are for parents who have teens who are learning to drive. Some are for families. But this last season was our group of young people who are university students and have been driving for several years. And we have short clips, very short clips of something that happens on the road. And we're not talking about major crashes. We're talking about something somebody does on the road that they shouldn't have done. We play the clip and we ask people to stop the podcast and review the clip and then come back to a discussion. And the discussion is about what happened, what did the person do wrong, what could they have done better, what other choices did they have, that kind of thing. And it's very interesting. And I think for young people who are learning to read, that's a good approach. It's as interactive as we can get when we're doing things online. We also have a number of videos that we've done, and everything that we do is 2 minutes, except for the podcasts are like 2 minutes or less for videos. A series of videos from stunt drivers who worked on the Fast and Furious. And that's important because they talk about the fact that the things that you see in movies are not real. A lot of the videos that they talk, the movies that they talk about, they worked on, they were, everything was controlled. Pedestrians on the road, the other cars, everything was controlled. They were completely closed sets. So, and in a lot of cases, they drive at lower speeds and speed up the video. So I think in a time when people are paying so much attention to crazy fast videos they see or movies and video games, it's important to get that message out that a lot of the stuff they're trying to reenact isn't real. We have a series of instructional videos that we did with Canadian Tire that are talking about why tire tread are important, tire rotation, tire pressure, and those kinds of things. We also have a series that we did with the Ontario Trucking Association that talk about sharing the road with big trucks. And we are a very prosperous province. We have a lot of big trucks on the road, but there's not a lot of information about how to share the road safely. And they're all like 2 minutes. Whoops, sorry. That last one is a new program that we're doing with police services. This one we just did on Saturday with Toronto Police Service. And this is a G1 test prep course. And it's highly interactive. I do part of it and the police do part of it too, to help young people get their G1. And the reason that's important is because driving is great fun, but it opens a lot of doors too. There are all kinds of jobs that once you have a license, they become available to you. And so that's what that's about. And the other one that they're showing the signs for the Vision Zero Youth Network. That is, last year we had 38 ambassadors in the Vision Zero Youth Network. And the way that program works is that we get together on Zoom once every 6 weeks and discuss a topic. And the topics are the ones that I told you about: distracted driving. We talk about impaired driving. We talk about lack of sleep, drowsy driving, and those kinds of things. There is a learning part of it. And then the young people, who are all high school students, go away and come up with ways to share what they've learned with their schools and their communities. And it's a really good program. It's a lot of fun. And but a lot of that information you just don't get anywhere else. And then my last little slide here is exactly, or in keeping with what Aidan and Kiana were saying, and that young people don't look for information about this. If they have a question, they ask their friends, and they're not likely to get perhaps as thorough or as accurate answers as they must. In all the young people that I've dealt with, and tens of thousands, I always ask them, have you ever checked the website for your city or your community online for road safety information? And in all that time, I only had one person say yes. And I do believe her. Nobody, I mean, they're great information, but nobody looks at them. So you have to go to them. And peer-to-peer works best. Same age is good, or a little bit older. And I think Kiana said that enough to have a little bit more experience and a little bit more pull, but still close enough. Diverse messengers, because people want to get information from people who look like them. Short messages, most of what we do is under 2 minutes. Has to be entertaining. There has to be a reason to watch, or interesting. Must be consistent messaging, must be from trustworthy sources with limited reading, and they must be timely. And that's when I think Aidan was talking about using current trends. And that's basically what I have to say.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for that amazing overview. I'm going to pass it off to Sylvia to tell us a little bit about the programming that she runs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I run the Community Learning Hub, which has a variety of online learning modules for at-risk youth and adults. One of the main programs that I've been running since 2020, and then prior to that in 2018, I was delivering Weed Out the Risk exclusively. Weed Out the Risk is one of the main programs in the Community Learning Hub. It's the most used program because it's used by educators across Canada. And what Weed Out the Risk does is focus on the risks of cannabis impaired driving. So though we don't talk as much as a diverse field of topics like Anne-Marie does, where there's so many important topics that need to be covered when it comes to driving, Weed Out the Risk is really just focused on the impairment of how cannabis affects your ability to operate a vehicle safely. Started out on the focus of youth specific, and the program launched in 2018 with cannabis legalization. We've now grown the program to have a similar but different module catered to adults. And this concept is something that has a lot of overlap in information, but the way the content is presented is obviously catered to an adult audience. So as time goes on, there's been a huge diversification of the program. I'll show a little bit about what it looks like so you can get a sense of the programming and whatnot. So the program is bilingual, or there's a French version and an English version. So everything is mirrored, just translated. And there's 30 slides within the program. Now, within an hour workshop where a facilitator would deliver this workshop to the youth, and this is in a variety of different settings. It can be in a classroom done by a phys ed teacher. It could be done in a driving school. It can be done in a health facility. It can be done in like a nurse coming into a school and delivering the workshop. There's all sorts of different applications for it. In the 30 slides that we have for the program, you'll see here They're all labeled, so facilitators will pick out which slide they want to deliver. And it allows the content to match what the needs of the participants are. So for some youth, they might need a more humorous route to have things relatable and connect to them, where another group of students might need a bit heavier of a top-down approach with strong facts and you know, kind of cutting numbers to really make them see the severity of the issue that we're talking about here. So based off the facilitator's knowledge of the participants and their context, they'll select the slides that make the most sense to curate a presentation that best fits for them. So an example of some of the different types of program slides within the program. I'll start with this one here, which I really like. And this one is where we're comparing driving high to someone packing your parachute who is high. So what happens, and I'm not going to play the video, but what happens in this video is this character is going skydiving and then realizes the person packing his parachute is high, and he's kind of mixing up the ropes. And then he kind of looks at his friend and he's thinking, do I really want to jump out of the plane when the person packing my parachute is high and is, you know, not really sure what they're doing? And the idea is to match that same concept to driving high, because you want to trust that when you're a passenger in a car, the person driving is of sound mind, they're paying attention. And so it's using that analogy. You know, obviously having youth leaders in the videos is a really helpful tool that we find works to get youth engaged. Another approach that we find really effective, and I'm showing you slides here that we find pretty integral that almost every single facilitator will use, regardless of the context, because they just seem to be so fundamental to driving the message home. This one here is really, so when we go into a classroom or talk to students about the risks of driving high, their key things that they're thinking about are, how do I avoid getting caught and what are the consequences? Like, that's what they want to know. But what we kind of spin things around is to not think about things in that way and think about things from a public safety perspective. So rather than what are the consequences, think about what is it going to mean for the rest of your life if you have to live with the emotional side of having hurt someone in the car, who's likely your friend, your partner, a loved one, someone you care about. What does it feel like to live with the guilt of hurting somebody else on the road, somebody in your community, right? Other pedestrians. So reframing the way we talk about the issue, not just in a legal financial perspective, which we will go through. There are slides that are specific to here are the financial costs to driving high if you get caught or have a collision. And here are the legal consequences that you're risking when you make that choice. But before going into that, we really like to drive home this message of it being a public safety issue and what it's like to live with that guilt. You know, for example, we have another slide. Let's see if I remember it now. I can't remember the slide, so I'm not going to even try, but it's where we have a lived experience of someone who was actually in a collision where multiple of their friends was killed because they chose to drive high. And now that person has to sit in jail. And yes, a legal consequence is that they are in jail for many years for driving high, driving impaired. But the emotional toll of living with that guilt of killing your friends far outweighs the other consequences, right? So just reframing things in that way. And then after all of this information and the fact sharing, we've got a lot of games. So the last 5 slides are all different types of games and activities. So to give you an example, we've got a Jeopardy style game. So we split the group into 2 sides and they take turns picking out, you know, the number that they want to go with. And they get really competitive with it. And, you know, sometimes maybe something traumatic has happened in the school, and this has happened to me various times before. And it's really just not the day for students to be sitting there listening to a lot of information coming at them. And so I take these opportunities to spend a lot of time playing these activities where they can learn, you know, through this way. It also is really effective for students who think that they know it all. So it's like, okay, let's, test your knowledge here. We also try to like incorporate things that will make sense for various different learning styles. So for example, we have this activity which is role play. So if you've got like a very artsy group of students who is outgoing and extroverted and likes to kind of have fun, then there's this activity where they go into different groups and they have to play out this different peer pressure. So peer pressure to drive when you've been using high. So let's pretend you're at a party, you're like you or someone in your friend group who's driving is using. How are you going to get yourself out of that situation? And then in groups of 3 or 4, they have to figure out how they're going to navigate that. And if they're struggling, the facilitator can click this card and it kind of gives them some guidance in how they can present that role play to the rest of their peers. So that's where I'll leave things as far as what Weed Out the Risk looks like, and a little bit about how the program is designed, and in summary, yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Sylvia, for that overview of the website. So we're going to move on to our panel questions. And we'll start off with the first one, which is kind of broad, which is, what are some of the biggest issues in youth road safety, and how can we tackle them? And if you have any specific effective strategies that you've used and you've seen has worked, like, please feel free to share. So maybe I'll start with Anne-Marie and then Sylvia. Oh, Anne-Marie, you're on mute.
One of the biggest issues for us, and I think it is for a lot of groups, especially post-COVID, is funding. That everything costs money. And so that's a big issue today. It's also getting invited into schools or into groups. And most of us and school teams are focusing now on mental health, and they'll say that like that's our big focus right now is mental health, and that's valid, of course. However, this is the time when we can talk to teens. After that, it's a much harder group to reach. So I would say that that's one of the biggest things we find is it's very hard to get invited to student activities, and mental health is kind of overshadowing right now.
Do you have any strategies that you've used to try and, get over that hump?
It's just really tough, and the players change all the time. It's just a really frustrating time. I think as we move further from COVID, things will open up a little bit more again, but it's a tough time.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. Sylvia?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can relate. That's definitely a challenge. One of the other big things that I find is in my job, I do a lot of training of facilitators. They're really keen to have this information, but there's a lack of confidence at the end of it. And so making sure that training programs are really designed in a relatable way so they feel like they can deliver the content. I think it is hard being an adult, when you're over, I don't know, let's say like you're over 30, 35, and you're trying to talk to youth about these topics. You're kind of in a far distance from relating to the experiences that they've had, or the experiences you've had with it aren't quite the same anymore. And for a lot of teachers, they're used to talking to their students in a very much one-directional approach. And these conversations are meant to be very conversational, very engaging. And so it's a bit of a switch gears, and getting the students to be open to seeing you as an understanding figure to the experiences that relate to why they would be in certain situations. So I find that to be the biggest challenge, is to make sure that after a facilitator has the information they need to deliver the content, that it can really be applied in the most effective way, and that they feel comfortable doing that.
Great. Yeah. Any specific strategies that you've used that you found can build that rapport with youth and get them to kind of trust you or, listen to what you say?
The biggest thing that I always say to facilitators is the more the youth talk, the better. So asking a lot of open-ended question and celebrating everything that they say, even if they say something that doesn't make sense or is completely wrong, like weed can't kill you. It's like, instead of just saying, well, that's not true, just saying something like, I completely understand why you'd say that, because weed is different than other substances where overconsumption generally is lethal and weed isn't really like that. But the decisions you make when choosing to use can have lethal consequences. So you're not ever putting down what they've said, but you're just reorienting it into a way that makes them feel very heard and validated, and then continuing the learning.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And that kind of goes into the next question that I have for Kiana and Aiden. And that's looking at, who or what do you think influences youth when it comes to road safety and driving behavior? And if you have any specific examples, again, please feel free to share. So I'll go with Aiden and then Kiana.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I know like one thing that influences me and a lot of my peers is social media. There's so much like different content when it comes to like road accidents, different issues that happen on the road, distracted driving, and social media is where we spend a lot of our time. And I noticed like when things happen, like the next day or the same day, it starts a trend on social media, and then you start talking about that. For example, I know like last week or a couple of weeks ago, me and my friends were talking about this accident that happened on the 401, and it started to build like different reports or different like engagement between us because we were like wondering, okay, what happened, how did it happen? And I believe it was someone like around the same age as us, so it did really catch our attention in that way, and it built like more of a safety awareness towards us because we want to make sure we don't do that as well. So definitely social media, the things that are posted by different news outlets on social media, different web pages on there, it does make a difference and an influence in different youths.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Kiana?
Yeah, I think along with social media and different news outlets is really just like the close network of peers that you have around you. Like I know for myself growing up playing a lot of sports, it was like my parents driving or carpooling with other kids and their parents, or when my older friends started to get their licenses, me being in their cars and kind of seeing their driving behaviors. Um, and it's definitely both the negative behaviors and the positive behaviors that have stuck with me. So say like music being played too loud. Like when I started driving, like my music was like fully blasted, windows down. Like you kind of carry on those habits. But then I also remember like one of my friends correcting me and being like, "Kiana, like put on your seatbelt." And then ever since then, like anytime anybody gets in my car, that's something I always check for. And I think even my parents as well. Like I can remember, like as young as like 10, my dad showing me that he does a little walk around of his car every time before he gets in, and that's kind of a habit I've carried over as well. So I think the onus is definitely on older peers and family members to kind of like reinforce those good behaviors for young drivers.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Social media and just role models in your life can be huge influences, and that's something that we've heard from other young people as well. Okay, our next question for Anne Marie and Sylvia is, and you kind of touched on this already, but what are some challenges that you faced when it comes to engaging youth in road safety programming, and what have been some strategies that you've used to overcome those challenges?
You want to go first, Celia?
Sure, yeah. So one of the things that I've found as a challenge is continuing the conversation. So you can have a really effective workshop and the youth can sit there and be like, oh, okay, like I think I get this. And I've had great workshops where I've seen kids turn around and do a 180. But then give it a month and they find themselves in certain situations and maybe everything you said in the workshop, like it's only an hour or 45 minutes, right? It doesn't apply. Or there was just, you didn't get to say it all. And so being able to carry on and have content like a toolkit to continue the conversation over time and revisit it. And so that means like open-ended questions later on. So, share this information with your friends and your family and, what your parents have to say about it. And I think scheduling time to have that is going to be really important to having the content really resonate and last.
Great, thanks, Sylvia.
And of course, I agree with that. I think my issue is more about opening the conversation with my team to get and to educate, because a lot of things, for example, distracted driving, texting, that is how young people communicate. And if I said something to them about texting, it would be, oh yeah, well, they're much better texters than I am, and valid, absolutely valid. However, I'm a better driver than they are. And when they have less experience, that's a really can be a really fatal combination. So it's about talking about those things, and it's about showing them with activities that very few people, and less than 4% of people, can truly multitask. Mostly we switch back and forth between things when we're talking about distracted driving. And that can be a very bad thing to do, a very dangerous thing to do. So it's showing rather than telling. And I work through young people because it doesn't work for me to tell because I'm too much away from their age group.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Anne-Marie. Next question is for Kiana and Aiden, and that's, what advice would you give organizations who would like to start engaging youth in their work? So maybe Kiana and then Aiden.
Yeah, for sure. I think originally, if you're wanting to engage youth, like your advertising that you do and your call-outs that you do should be like very youth focused and information that like we find visually appealing and that we would want to be a part of. I think that's huge for sure. And then also, I think Sylvia mentioned this, but just really creating a welcoming space. I think sometimes it's hard for youth in environments that are mostly adults to, feel confident in what we're saying and feel like our thoughts are heard. So definitely creating a welcoming environment and challenging us with, great questions to get us thinking and to make us feel like we're really part of something powerful as well.
Great, amazing. Aiden?
Yeah, that's great advice, Kiana. The other thing is making sure you really want to hear their perspectives, not just sending out a survey, that one time just to get their feedback, and then after that, it's done. Like the Parachute Road Safety Council that we had, they really, I guess, involved us, and we really did feel like we made a difference with that Road Safety Council. So having something like that, I guess, will definitely help, get all the perspectives of youth and make them feel like they are making a difference. Because we really, for youth, we want to make a difference as well, but we need different outlets to do that. So I think that's really important in keeping everyone engaged, not just doing something one time, but keeping the conversation going.
Great, thanks, Aiden. Last question for the entire panel, and that's, why should youth actively participate in road safety programming? You can keep it brief. So Kiana, we'll start with you.
For sure. I think road safety programming is often an overlooked part of public health. And I think because our young people are moving up and becoming our new generation of, drivers or people that take transit or are pedestrians, it would be awesome to involve them and they can, have a big impact for our future generations of young people as well.
Amazing. Go to Aiden.
Yeah, I guess one piece is that you can make a difference, right? Any little feedback that you give does have an impact on, road safety, because you're giving your advice to share with professionals that can actually make a change. So I think that's really important, is no matter what piece of advice you give, that could definitely make a difference in the future of road safety.
Great, amazing. And Sylvia and then Anne-Marie.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, their peers are their most influential part of their life. So if we can really have the youth themselves on board with the work, then that's going to be one of the most effective strategies to creating the results we want.
Awesome.
And I would say we don't know what we don't know. And that's why talking to other people and hearing what happened to them and their experiences, that's why it's so important. And the other thing is that this generation of drivers are going to be the ones teaching their kids. So this is where it starts. And if we get a really good involved group of youth now, the next generations will benefit too. and often parents, because young people learn things and go back to their parents and say, no, you can't do that because, like Deanna was saying, her dad doesn't walk around the car. Well, I suspect he does now after you. You know, it's they share, and that's really great.
Great, thank you. Big thank you to our panelists. We will open up the floor for questions from the audience. We have about 4 minutes left. I know there is one in the chat. Oh, this one is specifically for Anne-Marie. So if you can clarify, if you meet every 6 weeks and have a learning topic, how long do you present versus how long do the youth leaders discuss at their meeting? And do you share what they have done afterwards?
Yes. Usually the first meeting is about the topic. So for example, it'll be about distracted driving. There is a learning that's usually about 20 minutes or so. And then they will discuss what's happening. First meeting in September is usually fairly short. Then the next meeting, we go through what they did with it. In the meantime, they're on a Slack, they're sharing what they're doing, but they come back and report at the next meeting about what they did, how they did it, and show video sometimes about what they did in their school or their community. Some of them are absolutely amazing. And then we have the next topic. So that's basically how it works. The meetings go from about an hour to 2 hours, depending on how much sharing and what the topics are.
Great, thank you, Anne-Marie. Any other questions, please feel free to drop in the chat. I have a question for Sylvia, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. And that's just a little bit, if you can tell me a little bit about how the harm reduction kind of lens has worked for your programming. Are the youth receptive to it? What's the feedback like?
Yeah, it's really well received by youth. The only time it isn't well received by youth is if I'm in a group where they're like highly religious and they're coming from a background where that's not what they're taught and not the way that they think or discuss about drugs. I've also had the challenge of harm reduction when I've been in Catholic schools. I've had like priests kind of come in and just be like, there is no talk about if you choose to use, you don't use. So there's, I think, religion, when we get involved in those environments, is when we face a little bit of challenge with harm reduction. But other than that, it's really well received by the youth. And I think the teachers find it a lot easier as well to communicate with youth when they're coming in from that approach.
Great. Awesome. Any other question? Let me just check the chat, or if you want, you can unmute as well if you have any questions. If not, we can wrap up. Give it a couple of seconds. Doesn't look like there is any. Okay. Let me just quickly go back to sharing my screen. Okay. So if there are no questions, that's totally fine. That's a wrap for the Café Scientifique. We do have a feedback survey in English and French from the CIHR that we're hoping that everyone who has attended can complete. We will put the link in the chat and also send it in a follow-up email. If you'd like to get into contact to discuss youth engagement and road safety, please feel free to email me. My email is there. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of our panelists and our youth council members, Kiana, Aiden, and Parsa, for co-planning and co-organizing this Café Scientifique, as well as the Youth Design Jam that's happening right after at 5 p.m. Eastern. And of course, a big thank you to the Canadian Institutes of Health Research for their support in making the Café Scientifique possible. Again, thank you all of you so much for attending, and we hope to see you at our future road safety webinars. Have a great day.